my name is Linda, your moderator for today's Zone 7 gardening conversation on Winterberry and Sparkleberry. Thank you for joining us today. The Zone 7 gardening series of plant clinics is sponsored by the Virginia Cooperative Extension program of Virginia's two land-grant universities, Virginia Tech and Virginia State University. Staffing our plant clinics are Master Gardeners from the Fairfax County Master Gardeners. Master Gardeners provide science-based information about gardening and horticulture topics. Today, we will be talking with our gardeners, Sonya and Elizabeth, who have lots of great information to share with us about these shrubs growing in Zone 7. Before our conversation with Sonya and Elizabeth, we will have our guest gardener, Mary Ellen, share with us some information about turtlehead, a lovely perennial for your pollinating garden or along a pond in your garden. For today's talk, our VCE host is Susan, and our alternative host is myself, and Susan will also be our Zoom support for today. After our conversation and chat, we will turn to questions submitted during registration. Garden zones were developed by the USDA to help growers understand which plants are most likely to thrive in a particular minimum temperature. Here you can see the USDA plant hardiness map is based on the average annual minimum winter temperature for a zone, which helps gardeners to select plants that will most likely thrive in their zone. Zone 7 is shown in light green, which includes our region of Virginia. Many factors within a zone influence the average minimum temperature, including elevation, proximity of large bodies of water, and warming effects of the cities. Because of these variations in temperature within a zone, it's important to consider your growing season, which is determined by your first and last average frost dates. This map, the Virginia Hardiness Zone map from the VCE, more precisely depicts planting times that will promote good growth of plants. Note the last spring frost dates and the first fall dates for Zone 7. Most of Fairfax County is in Zone 7A. Here's 7A, goes from here all the way up to here is Fairfax County, except for a small portion adjacent to the Potomac River, right in here, which is Zone 7B. To find exactly when you should plant in Zone 7, it is important to look at your growing season, which can be determined from this map. Here in Zone 7, we have milder winters without the extremes of cold in the zones to the north of us and the extremes of heat in the zones to our south, placing our gardens in a transition zone between these two extremes. Before we turn to our main presentation on Winterberry and Sparkleberry with Sonya and Elizabeth, our guest gardener, Mary Ellen, is going to share with us about this perennial currently blooming in Zone 7, Turtlehead. Over to you, Mary Ellen.
Thanks, Linda. Chelone, Turtlehead. To begin with, there are several species of turtlehead. Chelone galbra, pictured here on this slide, is white, sometimes tinged with pink. Chelone leoni, pictured on the next slide you'll see, is pink. And Chelone obliqua is a pinkish red color, pictured on the reference slide. Although varying in color, all of these species share common characteristics.
Mary Ellen, what are some growing characteristics of this native plant?
Okay, Linda. In the fall, as blooms and plants subside and begin to fade, turtlehead fully emerges with lustrous dark green leaves and delicate blossoms stacked in a sturdy spire or raceme, 2 to 3 feet in height. A sun-loving native, This perennial prefers wet to moist, loamy soil, so it's often found growing in wetlands, near bogs and ponds, as well as in well-tended home gardens. Though, like many plants, natives, turtlehead can adapt and grow in less than ideal soils and conditions. And like many natives, it's easily grown by seeds, eventually developing plants which spread by rhizomes. These plants form colonies which can grow 3 to 4 feet in width. When this occurs, it is easily propagated by dividing, which is done best in the fall. Another way to propagate is by stem cuttings in early spring. Turtlehead blooms from late fall even to frost in some places. Throughout the growing season, it is relatively disease resistant, but sometimes rust and mildew may develop in overgrown colonies. Dividing the clumps mitigates this problem by improving air circulation. Another bonus for many gardeners is that turtlehead is deer and rabbit resistant. As far as its importance as a native, turtlehead attracts hummingbirds, bees, and numerous other pollinators. It also supports 2 native butterflies, the Baltimore checker spot and the common buckeye. And I might mention that this particular colony is called, it's a hybrid, and it's called Hot Lips. So you can find it in your local garden store. Finally, it's interesting to note that the botanical name of turtlehead, Colony, has its origins in Greek mythology. According to the myth, the lovely nymph Colony was invited to attend a feast prepared by Zeus. She was rather rudely slow to leave her house in the woods, primping and admiring her appearance. Hermes, the messenger god who had delivered the invitation, was furious. In anger, he transformed her appearance to that of a turtle. Her delicate skin was changed to scales, and she was forced to amble through the woods and the marshes with her house upon her back.
Thanks for sharing that lovely story. Here are Mary Ellen's references. Are there any references that you'd like to point out to the folks online?
Yeah, the one that I really liked and got a lot of information, interesting information, was the Piedmont Master Gardeners. I've used that resource a number of times and always found it very helpful.
I agree. All right. Thank you, Mary Ellen.
You're welcome.
Turtlehead is such a beautiful native plant. It's deer stay away and the wildlife love it. And I have some turtlehead in my pollinating garden. I have the white variety, and I just love to watch the bees just force their way into that flower to get the nectar. So thank you very much for sharing. Good afternoon, Sonya. Thank you for sharing our conversation with the spectacular native shrub. Could you share some background information on Winterberry?
Sure. Winterberry, or Ilex verticillata, is a native deciduous tree shrub in the holly family, which is Aquifoliaceae. They vary very much depending on the one you purchase in size, from 3 to 15 feet in height, 3 to 10 feet in width. They have a vase shape. They're particularly great in the landscape for their winter appeal with the beautiful berries that in some cases stay throughout the winter. And interestingly, they're dioecious. So you have male and female plants. And of course, it's the female plants that produce the berries.
Oh, that's great information. Sonya, what are some growing characteristics of Winterberry?
So Winterberry is quite flexible. It can grow well in sun to part shade. The soil preferences are varied. They can grow in clay, loam, or sand, but they need the acidic soil. And what's also a very interesting trait is that it can handle wet soil. So It's great in trouble spots. It's not very drought tolerant, however. Because of the ability to grow in wet soil, it's great for poorly drained landscapes and rain gardens. The blooms, which are not particularly spectacular, occur in June and July. And they are, I have a photo of them here, these tiny little whitish cream colored flowers.
Sonya, I understand that you need a male and several females in order to produce the berries.
That's correct. Because it's a dioecious, in order to have the berries, you need to plant a male plant. So the best what I understand is the best landscaping effect is if you plant in large drifts. And so you'll need a male plant which does not produce berries, can fertilize 4 to 5 female plants if they're far apart, but if they're within 40 feet of each other, it can pollinate quite a few. Now you need to make sure that the male plant that you purchase blooms at the same time as the female plants that you purchase. So when you go to the garden center, it's worth it to have a conversation with the staff to make sure that you get the correct male to female, otherwise you're not going to get any berries. And then the plants are bee pollinated. So, you know, that's why they need to be within a certain space of each other so the bees can get around.
Oh, great information. Sonya, is pruning necessary? And if so, when's the best time?
Yes, pruning is helpful. And what you want to do is you want to prune early in spring before the new growth starts, because the flowering and the berries occur on new growth. As I said before, acidic soil, otherwise they're quite tolerant. You can grow them from seed, which takes a long time, but it's quite easy to propagate from cuttings taken in the spring. This is a great native because there's no pest problems generally. Sometimes they get some powdery mildew. If they're in alkaline soil, there can be chlorosis and they might not fruit in dry soil. They tend to have suckers so that if you plant them in a mass, it tends to grow into this big mass from the suckers of bush, and they're great sort of in the background of like a flower bed.
All right.
Yeah. One other thing that I've read that I thought was kind of interesting is you can actually use other hollies, male hollies, to, I don't know, to fertilize the female hollies, as long as they, even evergreen, which is interesting, to fertilize them.
Are there any benefits to the pollinators and the wildlife?
Absolutely, they're wonderfully beneficial. They are a great source of food for the native bee population and the honeybees. They are fertilized by bees. They're a host plant for 34 different species of butterflies, including this little Henry's elfin butterfly that I have a photo of here. And they are a wonderful place to make homes for small animals in our forests and in our gardens. And they're a wonderful source of food for birds during the winter. Many birds eat the berries. So yeah, no, they're a great plant.
So I have a question. I have lots of deer. Are there any deer issues with browsing on the Winterberry?
I didn't read anything about there being deer problems. I don't know though if they are.
Well, hopefully not. Okay. Sonya, can you share with us some of the cultivars that are available?
Sure. As I said before, the cultivars vary quite a bit in size. And so that's probably when you're planning your flower bed, and you're considering size, that might be a direction that you go. But this is a picture of Afterglow, which has the red-orange fruit. And what's interesting is the fruits can persist until spring, I suppose, if the birds don't eat them all. and it's a slow growing and more compact form. And then there's one called Berry Heavy, which is mid-size and produces a large quantity of berries. And then in the next slide, I have a picture of Winter Gold, which, as you can see, has these more yellow gold fruits. These are mid-size as well, 5 to 8 feet. So you have a choice in color as well as in size, and which gives you a lot of options for your flower bed, you know, so that you can match up to what your dream plan is for the garden, and or, you know, rain garden, depending on what you're planning.
Thanks for showing the winter gold. I've never seen that variety before. All right, and here are Sonia's references. Are there any references that you'd like to point out to the folks online?
I thought particularly the one from the Clemson University, the rain garden plants was very interesting. And it also had suggestions for plants to grow with the Winterberry, you know, plants that like water and like acidic soil.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. I'll just leave that up there for a few minutes for people to take a look at. All right. Well, thank you, Sonya, for sharing the characteristics and growing conditions of Winterberry. Elizabeth, welcome to our conversation. And thank you for joining as we continue our conversation on Winterberry and Sparkleberry.
Thank you. It's interesting that I'm following Sonya because the Sparkleberry is a hybrid holly that resulted from a U.S. National Arboretum plant breeding program that occurred in 1961 with the objective to develop hollies that had hardy red berries and improved adaptability. And the Ilex Sparkleberry was the result. It was developed in 1961, but not released to commercial sale until 1978. And what it is a cross between a Japanese species, Ilex serrata, and the southeastern native, Versiliata, which Sonya just described to us. And the result is a shrub with heavy fruiting and large berries that come from the Asian parent, and the adaptability to survive in wet soils that are from the Versiliata parent. And what we have is a plant that has best of the both of their parents, but superior fruit retention. And I think that's what we always want. We want our children to be better than the parents. So this evidently fulfilled all of those obligations.
All right, great. So can you share with us some background on Winterberry and Sparkleberry?
Okay, Winterberries are both deciduous and dioecious, meaning that there are separate male and female plants. Sparkleberry is the female cultivar, which needs a male to produce the attractive red berries, which are the signature of the Winterberry plants. The male pollinator, as Sonya emphasized to us earlier, it must be a shrub whose flowers bloom at the same time as the female. And to the right, you see a Sparkleberry photo. One male Winterberry will be sufficient for pollinating 6 to 10 female shrubs. And the recommended male cultivar is Apollo.
All right. Elizabeth, can you tell us some growing conditions?
Okay, Sparkleberry is slow growing, large, upright, multi-stemmed, and it flourishes in USDA zones 5 through 9. It will flourish in full sun and partial shade, but it will bear more flowers and fruit if you put it in a sunny location. It is adaptable because of the breeding program, wet or dry sites, and a wide range of soil types, tolerant to air pollution and salts, but it prefers moist, acidic, organic loams, and it has good tolerance for wet conditions.
All right, are there any benefits to wildlife?
It provides a very good source of food for birds. And I have shown a photo of an insect pest, which is the holly leaf miner. Also, it is susceptible to spider mites, whitefly, and scale.
Are there any disease issues that we should be aware of when growing sparkleberry or winterberry?
The diseases that plague the sparkleberry are leaf spot, leaf rot, tar spot, and powdery mildew. And I suppose this is what differentiates it from the parent plant, the winterberry that Sonya described, because winterberry seems to be less susceptible to some of these things. This perhaps is something that came out of the breeding. And the plants are also susceptible to leaf drop, leaf scorch, and chlorosis, which is the yellowing of the leaves. I did some research on the chlorosis, and I found out that this is just an aesthetic problem. It won't kill your plants. The fact that they turn yellow does not mean that your plant is going to die. It's just an indication of high pH in the soil.
Okay, that's great. So it looks kind of bad, but it's not going to harm the plant.
Not going to die, yes.
Okay, wonderful news. So Elizabeth, would winterberry or sparkleberry be a good choice for a multi-seasonal interest in our gardens?
Oh, yes. And it has multi-season interest, spring, summer, winter, and fall, but most noticeable during the winter. In the spring, the females produce inconspicuous greenish-white flowers appearing in the leaf axils. And this happens in late spring through June. And the males produce abundant flowers. Then in the summer, there are glossy leaves. And then in fall, the leaves turn gold. And eventually, because it is deciduous, will fall. And you can see in the photo to the right here, there are some gold leaves in addition to the red berries. These berries are quite large, 5 to 5/16 inches. And in the winter, the large berries are there lasting through March, maybe even later, and they're very good for holiday decorations. So you might be tempted to cut some of these berries for some Christmas decorations or something.
Thanks for pointing that out.
It grows very tall, 12 feet tall, 12 feet wide. Some varieties do. It's good for borders, hedges, foundation planting. Excellent for moist soils in low spots or along ponds and streams. It tends to sucker and form colonies. And the preferred cultivars are Sparkleberry, which is a female, and Apollo, the male. I mentioned that just a little earlier. I am amused that they would name the male Apollo.
All right. Are these shrubs easy to pollinate?
Yes, they grow easily from softwood cuttings throughout the growing season. You can start them at just about any time. You're supposed to propagate them under mist using a cutting dip solution of 1,000 to 3,000 ppm IBA. I found this information in a professional source, so I'm not sure that many normal gardeners necessarily have cutting dip of 1,000 to 3,000 IBA in their tools or in their supplies, but I'm just passing it along. This is what the professionals use. And the roots occur in about 6 to 8 weeks.
Oh, that's pretty quick. So what about pruning? When and how should we prune the winterberry?
Well, since they can be very large, very tall, and very wide, you want to prune them to encourage width, bushiness, and they need to be pruned to prevent unruly spread. Prune in late winter before growth commences. And you want to encourage new flowering branches, which will ultimately result in more berries.
All right, great recommendations. All right, here is Elizabeth's references. Are there anything that you'd like to point out there?
What I really really felt that the U.S. National Arboretum reference was very good, maybe a little high level for most people to read, but still lots of excellent information and lots of background information and lots of interesting things in it. So from an interest point of view, I thought it was very interesting to read. Also, the Missouri Botanical Garden Plant Finder is an excellent source, and we've referenced it several times already today. So that would be something people would want to look at.
All right, great. Yes, they're an awesome site. So here's your references on your photos.
Right, and they're both the ones that I've already mentioned, Missouri Botanical Gardens and the National Arboretum.
All right, well, thank you, Sonya and Elizabeth, for all this great information on these stunning multi-seasonal shrubs. And like Elizabeth said, these make a great, taking the branches and twigs from the shrub and their bright berries make a spectacular flower arrangements during the winter season. So let's turn to questions submitted during registration. Belinda, are you online today? If you're online, if you could unmute yourself. So Belinda submitted a question, and she's interested in part shade perennials that flower in the fall. So on this slide, all of these flowers or plants are native, and they all provide great benefits to pollinators, and they look like a little bit of a moist soil. So the first one is New England aster, and it grows from 3 to 7 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. The white wood aster grows from 6 inches up to 3.5 feet tall. And then the Joe Pye weed gets rather tall. It goes from 2 to 8 feet, but there is a shorter, more compact variety that I happen to have in my garden. It's called Little Joe, and it grows from 3 to 4 feet tall to 2 to 3 feet wide. The next potential flowers and plants for Belinda's garden would be toad lily. And toad lily is actually a native from Japan. It's quite exotic looking, and it grows 12 to 36 inches tall. And then Japanese anemone is actually from China. I don't know how it got the title Japanese in its name. And it's 3 to 4 feet tall. And then red cardinal flower, it grows from 1 to 4 feet tall, and there's also a blue version of that as well. So check out also our Zone 7 garden. We had a session on 1 September on fall blooming perennials, and it should be posted on our website, if not now, soon. And you'll search for VCE-Fairfax County in your browser. Also, a great site that we talked about today is the Missouri Botanical Gardens, and they have a plant finder website. So you basically just put your plant in there and then put the name of it .org, and it will bring up your plant and the growing characteristics of that plant.